The clattering of train wheels on iron tracks faded as a young woman stepped unsteadily onto the weathered platform of Ouray, Colorado's depot. Emma Vanderburg's trembling hand rested on her slightly swollen belly, her face streaked with dried tears as the locomotive that carried her this far along with the man who had promised her the world disappeared into the mountain pass, leaving behind nothing but a plume of black smoke and broken promises. It was 1882, and Emma found herself completely alone in a mining town nestled in the San Juan Mountains, with nothing but a carpet bag containing her few possessions and the child growing inside her. The evening chill of early autumn in the Rockies cut through her thin cotton dress, a cruel reminder that she was woefully unprepared for the mountain weather or the predicament she found herself in. "Last stop, miss," the station master called, locking the ticket office door. His eyes darted briefly to her midsection, then away just as quickly, his expression a mixture of pity and judgment that Emma was becoming all too familiar with. "Town's that way if you're looking for the hotel." Emma clutched her bag tighter, fighting back fresh tears. She had exactly $3.42 to her name, not enough for more than a night, at even the cheapest establishment. Thomas had taken everything else when he slipped away at their last stop, leaving her with nothing but a hastily scribbled note explaining he wasn't ready for family life. "Thank you," she managed, her voice barely audible above the mountain wind that swept across the platform. As the station master retreated into his office, Emma sank onto a bench, the reality of her situation crashing down around her. The depot gradually emptied as the few other passengers were greeted by waiting family or trudged toward town. No one spared a second glance for the young woman sitting alone as darkness fell and temperatures dropped further. Emma pulled her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders, wondering how things had gone so terribly wrong. 6 months ago, she had been the respectable daughter of a Boston merchant, with prospects and a future. Then Thomas came with his charming smile and grand tales of opportunity in the West. They would be married, he promised, just as soon as they reached Colorado, where he had a claim that would make them rich. Emma had believed every word, leaving behind her disapproving family and the only home she'd ever known. Now, as the depot lanterns were extinguished one by one, leaving her in growing darkness, she realized the full extent of her foolishness. "Madam, station's closing for the night." Emma looked up to find the station master standing over her, keys in hand. "I just need a moment to gather myself," she said, trying to sound confident though her voice betrayed her. "Suit yourself, but I'm locking up. Bench outside is public property, though it'll be mighty cold tonight." With that, he tipped his hat and walked away, the click of the lock on the station door sounding like a death knell in the quiet mountain air. Emma gathered her carpetbag and moved to the outside bench. The mountains loomed large and dark against the night sky, beautiful but intimidating in their vastness. What had seemed like adventure now felt like exile, and for the first time since Thomas had left her, Emma allowed herself to weep openly, her shoulders shaking with each sob. "Miss, are you all right?" The deep voice startled her, and Emma looked up to find a tall figure standing a few feet away. She hastily wiped her tears, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "I'm fine, thank you," she replied automatically, though nothing could be further from the truth. The man stepped closer, and in the dim light from a nearby street lamp, Emma could make out a weathered face beneath a wide-brimmed hat. He was perhaps 30, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners, and a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble. His clothes were those of a working man: sturdy trousers, a wool coat, and boots scuffed from hard use. "Forgive me for saying so, but you don't look fine," he said gently. "Train left hours ago, Do you have somewhere to stay tonight? Emma stiffened, warning bells ringing in her mind. She'd already trusted one stranger and paid dearly for it. I'll manage, sir. The man seemed to understand her caution and took a step back, giving her space. Name's Yates Norwood, he said, removing his hat in a gesture of respect. I've got a ranch about 3 miles outside town. Came in for supplies and saw you sitting here as I was heading back. Emma said nothing, unsure how to respond. Yates shifted his weight from one foot to the other, seemingly uncomfortable with her silence. Look, miss, he continued, temperature's dropping fast and it'll be below freezing before midnight. There's no hotel with vacancies. Mining company representatives took every room. I couldn't sleep knowing I left someone out in this cold. What are you suggesting? Emma asked warily. My house has room, he said simply. Spare bedroom with a lock on the door. You can stay the night, get warm, and figure things out in the morning. No strings attached. Emma studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. All she saw was genuine concern and something else, a sadness or loneliness that somehow resonated with her own. Why would you help a stranger? She asked. Yates replaced his hat, adjusting it against the wind. My ma would haunt me till my dying day if I left a woman alone at night in this weather. A small smile crossed his features. Especially one in your condition. Emma's hand instinctively went to her stomach, and she felt color rise to her cheeks. Her condition was precisely why most people avoided her gaze. I'm not judging, Yates added quickly. Life's complicated enough without strangers adding to your burdens. My offer stands shelter for the night, and tomorrow I'll bring you back to town if that's what you want. Emma weighed her options, which were painfully few. She could stay and likely freeze, or she could take a chance on this stranger who seemed genuinely concerned for her welfare. I'm Emma, she said finally. Emma Vanderburg. Relief visibly washed over Yates's face. Pleased to meet you, Miss Vanderburg. My wagon's just down the street. As they walked toward the wagon, Emma kept a cautious distance. I want to be clear, Mr. Norwood, I won't. Miss Vanderburg, he interrupted gently, I offered you shelter, not impropriety. You'll have your privacy and my respect, nothing more expected. Something in his tone, a quiet dignity, made Emma believe him. The wagon was sturdy if weathered, with a team of 2 strong horses stomping impatiently in the cold. Let me help you up, Yates offered, extending his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Emma accepted, surprised by the calloused warmth of his palm against hers. Once she was settled on the seat, Yates covered her legs with a thick woolen blanket before climbing up beside her. It's not a long ride, but the wind cuts sharp through these valleys. As the wagon pulled away from Ouray, Emma cast one last glance at the darkened depot. She'd arrived with such different expectations, yet here she was, heading into the unknown once more, this time with a stranger whose kindness might be genuine or might mask something far more dangerous. Either way, she had made her choice. For tonight, at least, she wouldn't be alone in the cold. The journey to Yates's ranch passed mostly in silence, broken only by the occasional comment about the terrain or a warning about a particularly rough patch of road. Emma was grateful for the lack of prying questions, using the time to observe her unexpected benefactor. In the moonlight, she could see that his hands were strong and capable as they handled the reins, and though his clothes were worn, they were clean and well-maintained. The ranch appeared as they crested a small rise, a sturdy log home with a wide porch, flanked by a barn and several smaller outbuildings. Light glowed from one window, and smoke curled from the stone chimney, promising warmth within. It's not much, Yates said as he brought the wagon to a halt, but it's mine, free and clear. Pride tinged his voice, and Emma felt a pang of something like envy. To own something outright, to belong somewhere definite, these were luxuries she could scarcely imagine now. Yates helped her down from the wagon, maintaining a respectful distance once her feet touched the ground. "Let me tend to the horses, and then I'll show you inside. Doors unlocked if you want to go in and warm yourself." Emma hesitated, clutching her carpetbag. "I'll wait for you," she said, unwilling to enter a strange house alone. Yates nodded, understanding in his eyes. He worked quickly, unhitching the horses and leading them into the barn. When he returned, he carried a lantern that cast dancing shadows across the yard. "This way, Miss Vanderburg." The house was simple but welcoming, with a large main room centered around a stone fireplace where a fire burned steadily. A wooden table with 4 chairs occupied one corner, while a comfortable-looking sofa and reading chair formed a small sitting area. Bookshelves lined one wall, surprisingly full for a rancher's home. "You have quite a collection," Emma observed, drawn to the books despite herself. Yates looked almost embarrassed. "Winter nights are long out here. Reading helps pass the time." He gestured toward a hallway. "Spare rooms this way. Used to be my brother's before he moved to Denver with his wife." The bedroom was small but clean, with a narrow bed covered in a colorful quilt, a wooden chest of drawers, and a washstand with a basin and pitcher. A small window looked out onto the mountains, though now it showed only darkness. "There's fresh water in the pitcher," Yates said, lighting a lamp on the bedside table. "Bathrooms at the end of the hall. It's just an indoor privy, nothing fancy. Lock works on this door." He demonstrated the bolt, sliding it back and forth. "I'll be in the main room if you need anything." "Thank you," Emma said softly, suddenly overwhelmed by his kindness. Yates nodded, looking somewhat uncomfortable with her gratitude. "You must be hungry. I can fix something simple if you'd like." The mention of food made Emma's stomach growl audibly, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since morning. "That would be very kind," she admitted. "I'll leave you to get settled then." Yates backed out of the room, closing the door behind him. Once alone, Emma sank onto the bed, the events of the day catching up with her all at once. She allowed herself a moment of weakness, burying her face in her hands as silent tears fell. Then, drawing a deep breath, she straightened her shoulders. Self-pity would get her nowhere. She unpacked her few belongings: a nightgown, a change of clothes, a small hairbrush, and a tattered copy of Pride and Prejudice that had been her mother's. At the bottom of the bag lay a small velvet pouch containing her only piece of jewelry, her grandmother's wedding ring. Thomas had wanted her to sell it for train tickets, but Emma had refused. Now she was grateful for that small act of defiance. After washing her face and hands in the cool water from the pitcher, Emma made her way back to the main room, where delicious smells emanated from the small kitchen area. Yates stood at a cast-iron stove, stirring something in a pot. "Nothing fancy," he said without turning around. "Just beans, bacon, and cornbread I made this morning. Should still be good warmed up." "It smells wonderful," Emma said truthfully. She hesitated, then asked, "May I help with anything?" Yates glanced over his shoulder, surprise evident on his face. "You're my guest. But if you want to, plates are in that cupboard." Emma set the table as Yates finished cooking, the domestic activity feeling strangely comforting after days of uncertainty. When they sat down to eat, Emma realized just how hungry she was, the simple meal tasting better than anything she could remember. "So," Yates said after they had eaten in silence for a while, "what brings you to Ouray? You don't strike me as someone who planned to end up stranded at a train depot." Emma tensed, her spoon pausing halfway to her mouth. "It's not a pleasant story. Few stories that end with a woman alone at a depot are," he replied, "but you don't owe me any explanations." The lack of pressure loosened something in Emma's chest. "I was foolish," she said after a moment. I believed a man who promised me the world and delivered nothing but disappointment. He abandoned me at the last stop when he realized. She gestured vaguely toward her midsection. Yates's expression darkened. Some men don't deserve the title, he said, his voice low with controlled anger. Where were you headed? Nowhere specific anymore. Thomas, that was his name. He claimed to have a mining claim here in Colorado. I don't know if that was true or just another lie. Emma stared into her bowl, unable to meet Yates's eyes. I had nowhere else to go. My family made it clear I wasn't welcome back after I left with him. And now, Emma looked up, a bitter laugh escaping her. And now I have exactly $3.42 to my name, no home, no prospects, and a child on the way. My options are limited. Yates was quiet for a long moment, considering her words. Ouray's growing fast with the mines. Might be work available, especially with winter coming on. People need help with cooking, cleaning, mending. Who would hire a woman in my condition? Emma asked, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. Folks around here judge on work, not circumstances, Yates replied. Not everyone, mind, but enough. Tomorrow we can go into town, ask around. We? Emma questioned, surprised by his continued involvement. Yates shrugged, suddenly looking uncomfortable. Seems the least I can do, unless you'd rather go alone. No, Emma said quickly, perhaps too quickly. I would appreciate the help. I just don't want to impose on your kindness more than I already have. It's no imposition, Yates assured her, rising to clear the dishes. Been a while since I had company for dinner. Makes a nice change. As Emma helped with the washing up, she studied Yates from the corner of her eye. He moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own space, but there was a gentleness to him that contradicted his rugged exterior. For the first time in months, Emma felt something other than fear and regret, a tiny spark of hope that perhaps her situation wasn't entirely hopeless. Later, as she lay in the narrow bed with the quilt pulled up to her chin, listening to the wind howling outside, Emma placed a protective hand over her belly. We'll be all right, she whispered to her unborn child, trying to believe the words herself. Somehow we'll find a way. Morning arrived with golden light filtering through the small window, momentarily disorienting Emma as she woke in the unfamiliar room. For a brief, wonderful moment, she forgot her circumstances, then reality came rushing back. She was pregnant, abandoned, and currently dependent on the charity of a stranger. Rising, Emma dressed quickly in her second dress, a simple blue cotton that had once fit comfortably, but now strained slightly across her growing middle. She smoothed her hair as best she could with her small brush, then squared her shoulders and unlocked her door. The aroma of coffee and frying bacon greeted her, along with the sound of Yates moving about the kitchen. He looked up as she entered, a smile warming his features. Thought you might sleep longer, he said. You looked exhausted last night. I'm used to early mornings, Emma replied, folding her hands in front of her. May I help with breakfast, already done? Yates nodded toward the stove where bacon sizzled and a pan of biscuits was just browning. Coffee? Emma hesitated. I should probably avoid coffee in my condition. Water would be fine. Yates nodded, pouring her a cup of water from a pitcher. Forgot about that. My sister-in-law was the same way when she was expecting. Said coffee made her sick as a dog. The casual mention of pregnancy without judgment or embarrassment caught Emma off guard. She accepted the water with murmured thanks, then sat at the table where Yates had already placed plates and utensils. As they ate, Yates outlined his plan for the day. Thought we'd head into town after breakfast. Saturdays busy folks come in from outlying areas for supplies. Might be the best day to ask around about work. The boarding house sometimes needs help, and the mercantile too. You seem to have given this some thought, Emma observed. Yates shrugged. Couldn't sleep much. Got to thinking about your situation. Mr. Norwood, I appreciate everything you've done, but I don't expect you to solve my problems, Emma said firmly. Just helping a neighbor get on their feet, Yates replied. And please call me Yates. Mr. Norwood was my father. I'm hardly a neighbor, Emma pointed out. Yates's mouth quirked in a half-smile. Everyone in these mountains is a neighbor, Miss Vanderburg. Survival depends on it. Emma conceded the point with a nod. Then I suppose you should call me Emma. After breakfast, they set out for town in Yates's wagon. The morning was crisp but sunny. The mountains around them resplendent in autumn colors, aspen trees creating swaths of gold among the dark evergreens. Despite her uncertain circumstances, Emma couldn't help but be moved by the beauty surrounding them. It's breathtaking, she said softly. That it is, Yates agreed, glancing her way. Never gets old, no matter how many years you see it. How long have you lived here? Emma asked. Born and raised about 50 miles north of here, Yates replied. Pa was a trapper, then tried his hand at ranching. Bought my place 5 years ago when silver was discovered and land prices were still reasonable. Been working it ever since. Alone. The question slipped out before Emma could consider its propriety, and she felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. Mostly, Yates answered after a brief hesitation. My brother Daniel helped until he married and moved to Denver 2 years back. Have a ranch hand who comes by during calving season and neighbors pitch in when needed. Rest of the time it's just me. It seems like a lot of work for one person, Emma observed. It is, Yates admitted, but there's satisfaction in it, building something that's yours, watching it grow. He glanced at her briefly. What about you, before all this? What was your life like? Emma gazed at the passing landscape, considering her answer. Sheltered, she said finally. My father was a merchant in Boston, textiles mainly. I was educated at home by tutors, then at a small ladies' academy. I learned all the proper accomplishments: needlework, watercolors, a little French, how to pour tea correctly. She laughed, the sound hollow even to her own ears. Nothing particularly useful for the real world. Don't sell yourself short, Yates said. Those skills have value, especially out here where refinement is in short supply. Perhaps, Emma conceded, though I'd trade all my watercolor skills for knowing how to build a fire or cook on a wood stove. Those things can be learned, Yates pointed out, and you seem like a quick study. The simple vote of confidence warmed Emma more than she cared to admit. They lapsed into comfortable silence until the buildings of Ouray came into view, nestled in the valley below. The town was bustling when they arrived, the main street filled with wagons, horses, and people going about their business. Emma felt eyes turn toward her as Yates helped her down from the wagon, and she fought the urge to shrink away from the curious gazes. Head high, Yates murmured, seeming to sense her discomfort. You've done nothing to be ashamed of. His words strengthened her resolve, and Emma straightened her spine as they made their way toward the mercantile. The store was crowded with Saturday shoppers, and the proprietor, a balding man with spectacles perched on his nose, looked harried as he measured fabric for a customer. Morning, Mr. Peterson, Yates called, navigating through the crowd with Emma following closely behind. Yates Norwood, the shopkeeper acknowledged with a nod. Be with you in a moment. While they waited, Emma took in the store's impressive array of goods, everything from basic staples to more luxurious items catering to the tastes of those who had struck it rich in the mines. Her gaze lingered on a bolt of soft woolen fabric that would make a warm dress for winter, something her thin cotton garments could never provide against the mountain cold. See something you like? Yates asked, following her gaze. Emma quickly looked away. Just browsing, she said, embarrassed to be caught coveting something she couldn't afford, Before Yates could respond, Mr. Peterson approached, wiping his hands on his apron. "What can I do for you today, Yates?" "Actually, I'm here on behalf of Miss Vanderburg," Yates replied, gesturing toward Emma. "She's new in town and looking for work. Thought you might know if anyone's hiring." Mr. Peterson's gaze swept over Emma, pausing briefly at her midsection before returning to her face. To his credit, his expression remained neutral. "Pleasure to meet you, Miss Vanderburg. What sort of work are you looking for?" "Anything respectable, Mr. Peterson," Emma replied honestly. "I'm a quick learner and not afraid of hard work." The shopkeeper considered this. Mrs. Sullivan at the boarding house was just saying she could use help with the cooking and cleaning. Getting to be too much for her with all the mine officials staying there. And my wife mentioned the new doctor's office needs someone to manage appointments and keep records. He glanced at her again. "You look educated. Can you read and write well?" "Yes, sir," Emma answered, hope rising in her chest. "Very well, in fact. Might be worth talking to Dr. Harrison then. He set up practice last month building just past the assay office." Mr. Peterson looked between Emma and Yates. "You two related? Miss Vanderburg is staying at my ranch temporarily," Yates explained smoothly. "Just until she gets settled." Something in the shopkeeper's expression shifted, and Emma felt her cheeks warm at the implication. Before she could clarify, the bell over the door jingled as more customers entered. "Well, I'd best get back to it," Mr. Peterson said. "Good luck with your search, Miss Vanderburg. Yates, you need anything while you're here?" "Just the usual supplies," Yates replied. "We'll stop back after we check with Mrs. Sullivan and the doctor." Outside, Emma drew a deep breath of the crisp mountain air. He assumed. "People will assume what they want," Yates said with a shrug. "Doesn't make it true." "But it could damage my chances of finding respectable work," Emma pressed. Yates considered this. "Folks around here are practical. If you can do the job, most won't care about much else. But if it bothers you, we can look for somewhere in town for you to stay." The thought of being alone again sent a spike of anxiety through Emma, though she was reluctant to admit it. "Let's see what Mrs. Sullivan and Dr. Harrison have to say first," she suggested. "No sense making plans until we know what's possible." The boarding house was their next stop, a 3-story building that was one of the largest in town. Mrs. Sullivan, a plump woman with graying hair and a no-nonsense demeanor, answered the door herself. "Yates Norwood," she exclaimed. "Haven't seen you in an age. What brings you by? Need a room?" "Not today, Mrs. Sullivan," Yates replied. "I'm here to introduce Miss Emma Vanderburg. Mr. Peterson mentioned you might be looking for help." Mrs. Sullivan's shrewd eyes assessed Emma. "That I am. Place is bursting at the seams with the mining company executives in town. Can you cook, girl?" "Yes, madam," Emma answered, hoping her limited experience would be sufficient. "Though I'm more familiar with Eastern cooking than Western fare." "Food is food," Mrs. Sullivan declared. "As long as you can follow instructions and work hard, the rest can be taught." She glanced at Emma's midsection, then back at her face. "When are you due?" The directness of the question startled Emma. "Late February, madam." Mrs. Sullivan nodded matter-of-factly. "You can work until January then. I'll need help again after the baby comes if you're interested." $6 a week plus meals. Room would be extra, but I can offer a reduced rate for staff, $3 weekly for a small room on the 3rd floor. Emma quickly did the mental arithmetic. It would leave her very little for savings or supplies for the baby, but it was better than nothing. "That's very generous, Mrs. Sullivan. I would be grateful for the opportunity." "Can you start Monday?" the older woman asked. "Yes, madam," Emma replied, hardly able to believe her luck. "Good. Be here at 5 in the morning. Breakfast service starts at 6 sharp." Mrs. Sullivan turned to Yates. "You vouching for her, Norwood?" "I am." Yates confirmed without hesitation. "That's good enough for me. See you Monday, Miss Vanderburg." With that, Mrs. Sullivan disappeared back into the boarding house, the door closing firmly behind her. Emma turned to Yates, eyes wide with disbelief. "She hired me, just like that." "Mrs. Sullivan's a good judge of character," Yates said with a smile. "And she's practical. Needs help, you need work, simple as that." Emma's relief was tempered by the realization that she would still need to find lodging she could afford before the baby came. $3 a week for a room would leave her with almost nothing to save. "Shall we try the doctor next?" Yates suggested, seemingly reading her concern. "Might offer better pay." Dr. Harrison's office was a tidy building with freshly painted trim and a sign indicating his hours. Unlike the boarding house, it was quiet inside, with only a young man sitting in what appeared to be a waiting room. "Good morning," Emma greeted him. "Is Dr. Harrison available?" "That's me," the man replied, standing. He was younger than Emma had expected, perhaps 30, with intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. "What can I do for you today?" "I'm Emma Vanderburg," she introduced herself. "Mr. Peterson at the Mercantile mentioned you might be looking for someone to manage appointments and keep records." Dr. Harrison's expression brightened. "Indeed I am. Are you inquiring about the position?" "Yes, sir," Emma confirmed. "I'm well educated, organized, and have excellent penmanship." The doctor gestured for her to sit. "Tell me, Miss Vanderburg, do you have experience in an office or medical setting?" "No specific experience in medicine," Emma admitted. "But I assisted my father with his business correspondence and bookkeeping in Boston." Dr. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. "The position would involve scheduling appointments, maintaining patient records, sending bills, and generally keeping the office running smoothly while I attend to patients." He glanced at Yates, who had remained near the door. "And you are?" "Yates Norwood," he replied, "just accompanying Miss Vanderburg into town." The doctor returned his attention to Emma. "The hours would be 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and Saturday mornings until noon. I can offer $8 per week. Would that suit you?" Emma couldn't believe her ears. $8 was considerably more than Mrs. Sullivan's offer, and the hours would be less demanding. "That would be more than suitable, Dr. Harrison. Thank you." "Excellent." The doctor seemed pleased. "When can you start?" "I've just accepted a position at the boarding house beginning Monday," Emma explained, hesitant to relinquish the certainty of one job for another. "But perhaps we could discuss an alternative arrangement." Dr. Harrison considered this. "I suppose I could manage with part-time help for now. Afternoons, perhaps, after the breakfast rush at the boarding house. Say 1 to 5. I could offer $4 a week for half-days." Emma's mind raced. $4 from the doctor plus 6 from Mrs. Sullivan would give her $10 weekly, enough to afford the room at the boarding house and still save something for the baby. "That would be perfect," she agreed, hardly able to believe her good fortune. "Thank you, Dr. Harrison." "Don't thank me yet," the doctor replied with a smile. "Wait until you've seen my handwriting and the state of my filing system. I'm afraid organization isn't my strong suit." As they left the doctor's office, Emma couldn't contain her excitement. $10 a week, she breathed. "With careful budgeting, I might actually manage." Yates smiled, genuine pleasure in his eyes. "Told you folks here judge on ability. Let's head back to the Mercantile. You'll need some things if you're starting work Monday." "I can't afford much," Emma cautioned as they walked. "Just the essentials." "Consider it an advance on your wages," Yates suggested. "You can pay me back when you get your first pay." Emma stopped walking, turning to face him. "Why are you doing all this? You don't know me anything." Yates met her gaze steadily. "Everyone needs help sometimes, Emma. I've been on the receiving end more than once. Just passing it along." Something in his straightforward kindness touched Emma deeply, and she found herself blinking back tears. "Thank you," she said simply, unable to express the depth of her gratitude. They spent the next hour at the mercantile, where Yates insisted on purchasing not only basic necessities, but also the woolen fabric Emma had admired earlier. "You'll need a warm dress for winter," he said firmly when she protested. "Consider it a welcome to Colorado gift." By the time they loaded their purchases into the wagon and set out for the ranch, the sun was beginning its descent toward the western peaks, casting long shadows across the valley. Emma sat beside Yates feeling more hopeful than she had in months. She had 2 jobs, prospects for accommodation, and for the first time since Thomas abandoned her, a plan for the future. "You're awfully quiet," Yates observed as they crested the rise that would bring the ranch into view. "Just thinking," Emma replied. "Yesterday at this time I was certain my life was over. Now," she placed a hand on her stomach, "now I think we might actually have a chance." Yates's expression softened. "More than a chance, Emma. You've got determination and smarts. That's a powerful combination out here." As the ranch came into view, bathed in the golden light of late afternoon, Emma felt a strange pang. In just one day, the place had begun to feel like a sanctuary somewhere safe in a world that had shown her little kindness recently. "You're welcome to stay until you're ready to move to town," Yates offered, seemingly reading her thoughts. "No rush." Emma nodded, grateful for the reprieve. "Just until I receive my first wages," she promised. "I won't impose on your generosity longer than necessary." That evening, after a simple supper, Emma sat at the table with needle and thread, beginning work on the woolen fabric. Yates had built up the fire against the evening chill and settled in a chair nearby with a book, occasionally glancing up to watch her work. "You're skilled with that," he observed as her needle flashed in and out of the fabric. Emma smiled, pleased by the compliment. One of those proper accomplishments that turned out to be useful after all. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the soft sounds of Emma's sewing. It struck her how natural it felt to be sitting here with this man she barely knew, sharing the quiet evening hours. For the first time in months, Emma felt not just safe but at peace. The next morning, Emma woke to the delicious aroma of something baking. Dressing quickly, she found Yates in the kitchen, removing a pan from the oven. "Sunday breakfast," he explained with a slightly self-conscious smile. "Ma's recipe for cinnamon rolls. Only make them once a week, special occasion food." "It smells wonderful," Emma said, genuinely impressed. "I didn't know you baked." Yates shrugged, looking somewhat embarrassed. "Ma insisted all her children learn to cook. Said no one should depend on someone else for basic necessities." "She sounds like a wise woman," Emma observed, moving to help set the table without being asked. "She was," Yates agreed, a shadow of old grief crossing his features. "Passed 5 years ago, influenza." "I'm sorry," Emma said softly. Yates nodded his acknowledgement, then changed the subject. "Thought I'd show you around the ranch today if you're interested. You should see what you've been putting up with." "I'd like that," Emma replied, realizing she was genuinely curious about Yates's life and work. After breakfast, the cinnamon rolls were even more delicious than they smelled. Yates gave Emma a tour of the property. The ranch wasn't large by Colorado standards, he explained, but it was good land with reliable water from a year-round creek. He raised cattle primarily, with a small herd of horses he bred and trained for additional income. "This is my pride and joy," Yates said as they approached a corral where a magnificent black stallion stood watching them warily. "Midnight. Best quarter horse stud in 3 counties." The animal was indeed impressive, with powerful shoulders and intelligent eyes that seemed to assess Emma as thoroughly as she was studying him. "He's beautiful," she said, keeping a respectful distance from the fence. "And he knows it," Yates chuckled. "Temperamental as they come, but worth every bit of trouble for the foals he produces." As they continued their tour, Emma was struck by the obvious care Yates had put into every aspect of his ranch. The buildings were well maintained, the livestock healthy, the equipment orderly. Everything spoke of a man who took pride in his work and respected the land that sustained him. "You've built something wonderful here," Emma said as they returned to the house for lunch. Yates looked pleased by her assessment. "It's a work in progress," he said, "but yes, I'm proud of it." That afternoon, as clouds gathered over the mountains promising the season's first significant snowfall, they remained indoors. Emma continued work on her dress while Yates attended to paperwork at the table. The domesticity of the scene wasn't lost on Emma how easily they had fallen into companionable routines after just 2 days. "Will you be all right getting into town if it snows tonight?" Yates asked, glancing up from his ledger. "I suppose I'll have to be," Emma replied pragmatically. "Mrs. Sullivan expects me at 5 tomorrow morning regardless of the weather." Yates frowned, looking out the window at the darkening sky. "If it's bad, I'll take you in the sleigh. Roads might not be passable for the wagon." "You don't need to do that," Emma protested. "You've already done more than enough." "It's no trouble," Yates assured her. "Need to check on a few things in town anyway." Emma suspected this was an excuse, but she didn't argue further. The truth was, the prospect of making her way into town alone through a snowstorm was daunting. That night, as predicted, snow began to fall, large, soft flakes that quickly blanketed the landscape in white. Emma stood at the window of her small room, watching the transformation with a mixture of awe and trepidation. The beauty was undeniable, but so was the power of nature in this wild country. Morning arrived with a world transformed. At least 6 inches of snow had fallen overnight, with more still coming down steadily. Emma dressed warmly, grateful for the woolen shawl Yates had insisted on purchasing for her. She found him already in the kitchen, stoking the fire against the unusual chill. "Looks like we were right about the snow," he observed. "Breakfast is ready and I've got the sleigh prepared. We should leave in half an hour to make sure you're not late." The journey into town was unlike anything Emma had experienced. The sleigh moved smoothly over the fresh snow, the horse's breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Yates had provided thick blankets and heated stones wrapped in flannel to place at their feet, keeping them warm despite the open conveyance. "It's like something from a fairy tale," Emma said, gazing at the snow-covered mountains gleaming in the early morning light. Yates smiled, the expression softening his weathered features. "Wait until you see it when the sun's fully up. Nothing prettier in the world than these mountains after a fresh snow." They reached the boarding house with time to spare, and Emma felt a strange reluctance to leave the sleigh and Yates's company. "Thank you for everything," she said, suddenly feeling the inadequacy of the words. "You'll do fine," Yates assured her. "I'll be back this evening to check how your first day went, if that's all right." "I'd like that," Emma admitted, surprising herself with her candor. Mrs. Sullivan was impressed that Emma had made it through the snowstorm and put her to work immediately. The morning passed in a blur of breakfast preparations, serving, and cleanup. By the time Emma left for Dr. Harrison's office at 1 o'clock, she was exhausted but satisfied with her performance. The doctor's office presented different challenges. As Dr. Harrison had warned, his filing system was nearly non-existent, and his handwriting was atrocious. Emma spent the afternoon creating order from chaos, developing a system for patient records and appointments that would serve them going forward. By 5 o'clock, when Dr. Harrison finally insisted she go home, Emma was physically and mentally drained but proud of what she had accomplished. As promised, Yates was waiting outside with the sleigh. "How was it?" he asked as he helped her up beside him. "Exhausting," Emma admitted, "but good." Both Mrs. Sullivan and Dr. Harrison seemed pleased with my work. "Not surprised," Yates said, urging the horses forward. "You strike me as someone who does things thoroughly or not at all." The compliment warmed Emma more than it should have. As they traveled back to the ranch, she found herself studying Yates's profile against the darkening sky. In just 3 days, this man had become someone she depended on, a strange feeling for someone who had always prided herself on her independence. The next 2 weeks fell into a pattern. Each morning, Yates would drive Emma into town, returning in the evening to bring her back to the ranch. The snow had stopped after that first day, but the roads remained difficult for a woman in her condition to navigate alone. Emma insisted on cooking dinner each night to repay Yates for his trouble, and he seemed to genuinely enjoy her Eastern-style dishes. On the Sunday marking 2 weeks since their first meeting, Emma received her first wages, $6 from Mrs. Sullivan and $4 from Dr. Harrison. The feeling of holding her own hard-earned money was indescribable. "I can start paying you back now," she told Yates that evening, counting out dollars on the table. Yates shook his head firmly. "Keep it. You'll need it for the baby and for your room in town." "But I've imposed on you for 2 weeks," Emma protested. "Let me at least contribute to the household expenses." "You've been cooking every night and helping with chores," Yates pointed out. "That's contribution enough." Emma reluctantly returned the money to her purse, knowing further argument would be futile. "I should start looking for a room in town," she said instead. "It's not fair to expect you to drive me back and forth every day." Something like disappointment flickered in Yates's eyes, so quickly Emma thought she might have imagined it. "No rush," he said casually. "Winter's setting in properly now. Might be better to wait until the worst is past." Emma knew she should insist, that continuing to live under Yates's roof without any formal relationship between them was improper by any standard. Yet the thought of leaving the comfort and safety she'd found here filled her with dread. "Perhaps you're right," she conceded. "Just until the weather improves." That night, as Emma readied for bed, she caught sight of herself in the small mirror above the washstand. Her reflection showed a woman changed from the desperate, frightened creature who had arrived in Ouray just 2 weeks earlier. Her cheeks had filled out slightly from regular meals, and there was color in her face from the mountain air. Most notably, her eyes no longer held that haunted look of desperation. Placing a hand on her growing belly, Emma whispered, "We're going to be all right, little one. I promise." As November deepened into December, the weather grew increasingly harsh. Snowstorms became regular occurrences, and temperatures dropped well below freezing most nights. Emma continued her work in town, earning the respect of both her employers and gradually making acquaintances among the townspeople. To her surprise, few people seemed to judge her for her condition or her living arrangement with Yates. Mrs. Sullivan had raised an eyebrow when Emma explained she was staying at the Norwood ranch, but had simply remarked, "Yates is good people. Known him since he was knee-high to a grasshopper." One evening in mid-December, Emma returned from work to find Yates adding the finishing touches to a small wooden cradle placed near the fireplace. "What's this?" she asked, removing her snow-covered coat and boots. Yates looked almost shy, running a hand along the smooth wood. "Thought you might need it. For the baby." Emma approached the cradle, touched beyond words by the gesture. It was beautifully made with delicate scrollwork along the sides and a sturdy rocking base. "You made this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Yates nodded. Been working on it evenings while you were sewing. Daniel and Sarah, my brother and his wife, they were expecting when they moved to Denver. I started making one for them, but they left before it was finished. He shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. Seemed ashamed to let the wood go to waste. Emma ran her fingers over the polished surface, blinking back tears. It's beautiful, Yates, thank you. It's nothing fancy, he demurred. It's perfect, Emma insisted, looking up to meet his gaze. Something shifted in the air between them, a recognition of feelings that had been growing steadily over the weeks they'd spent together. Yates cleared his throat, breaking the moment. Dinner's almost ready, he said, turning toward the stove. Made venison stew, thought you might appreciate something different after 2 weeks of boarding house food. Emma smiled, grateful for his tact in changing the subject. It smells wonderful. Let me just wash up and I'll help you finish. As they ate dinner, conversation flowed easily between them, as it always did. They discussed the happenings in town, Yates's plans for spring planting, and Emma's progress with her work for Dr. Harrison. He's asked if I'd consider taking on additional responsibilities, Emma said, breaking off a piece of cornbread. He wants me to learn basic nursing skills, checking temperatures, bandaging wounds, that sort of thing. Says it would be helpful to have assistance during busy periods. You interested in that kind of work? Yates asked. Emma nodded thoughtfully. I am, actually. It's fascinating what Dr. Harrison does, and he says he'd increase my wages if I took on the additional duties. You'd be good at it, Yates observed. You have a caring nature. The compliment brought heat to Emma's cheeks. It would be more practical than watercolors and French, that's certain. After dinner, they sat by the fire as had become their custom. Emma worked on mending one of Yates's shirts while he read aloud from a book of Longfellow's poetry. The domesticity of the scene struck Emma again, how natural it felt to be here with him, how comfortable their routine had become. Yates, she said during a pause in his reading, what will happen when spring comes? He lowered the book, his expression questioning. What do you mean? Emma set aside her mending, choosing her words carefully. I've been here almost a month now. What was meant to be one night's shelter has turned into this. She gestured vaguely around them. It's not proper and we both know it. Does it bother you? Yates asked quietly. What people might think. It's not that, Emma replied honestly. Most people in town seem to have accepted the situation. It's more. I don't want to take advantage of your kindness indefinitely. Yates was silent for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and serious. What if I don't consider it taking advantage? What if I want you to stay? Emma's heart stuttered in her chest. What are you saying, Yates? He set the book aside and turned to face her fully. I'm saying these weeks with you here have been the best I've had in years. The house feels like a home again, not just a place to sleep between work days. Because someone's cooking and cleaning, Emma suggested, though she knew that wasn't what he meant. Because you're here, Yates corrected gently. Your conversation, your laugh, even the way you hum when you're sewing, it's brought life back to this place. To me. Emma felt tears gathering in her eyes. I'm carrying another man's child, she reminded him, her voice catching. A man who didn't want me or his baby. My reputation is in tatters. I have nothing to offer you. You have yourself, Yates said simply. That's more than enough. You can't mean that, Emma whispered, afraid to believe him. Yates moved from his chair to kneel beside her, taking her hands in his. I do mean it. I know it hasn't been long, and I know your life has been turned upside down. I'm not asking for promises or decisions right now. Just consider staying. Not as a guest or someone passing through, but as someone who belongs here. Emma studied his face, searching for any sign of pity or obligation. All she saw was sincerity and something deeper in emotion she was afraid to name. "The baby will come in February," she said softly. "Everything will change then." "Yes, it will," Yates agreed, "but my feelings won't." "How can you be so sure?" Emma asked. "You've known me barely a month." Yates smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious features. "Some things you just know, Emma. Like the first time you see land that's meant to be yours, or when you meet a horse that's going to be special. Some things speak to your soul in a way that can't be explained by time or reason." The conviction in his voice made Emma's breath catch. "I need time," she said finally, "to be sure my feelings are real and not just gratitude or dependency." "Take all the time you need," Yates replied, squeezing her hands gently before releasing them. "I'm not going anywhere." The weeks that followed were both wonderful and agonizing for Emma. Her feelings for Yates deepened daily, but so did her uncertainty about the future. As her pregnancy progressed, she grew increasingly aware of the realities awaiting her, the demands of a newborn, the challenges of being a mother alone, the financial struggles that lay ahead despite her improved circumstances. Christmas arrived with a heavy snowfall that transformed the landscape into a winter wonderland. Emma had secretly worked on gifts for Yates, a new scarf she had knitted from wool purchased with her own earnings, and a leather-bound journal to replace his tattered account book. To her surprise and delight, Yates had gifts for her as well: a beautiful rocking chair positioned beside the cradle, and a small silver locket containing a tiny lock of his mother's hair. "It's a family tradition," he explained as Emma held the precious object. "When a child is born, we place a lock of family hair in a locket for protection. I thought, perhaps your baby should have that connection to the past." Tears spilled down Emma's cheeks at the gesture. "You'd consider my child family?" she asked, hardly daring to believe it. "I already do," Yates replied simply. That night, as snowflakes danced in the darkness outside, Emma made her decision. After dinner, as they sat by the fire enjoying cups of hot cider, she gathered her courage. "Yates," she began, her voice steadier than she felt, "I've been thinking about what you said, about staying." He set his cup down, giving her his full attention. "And if the offer still stands," Emma said carefully, "I'd like to accept it. Not just because it's practical or because of the baby, but because—" She took a deep breath. "Because I've come to care for you, deeply." The joy that spread across Yates's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "The offer very much still stands," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "There's something else," Emma continued, needing to be completely honest. "I want to be clear about what I'm agreeing to. I'm not looking for charity or protection. If I stay, it would be as your equal partner in whatever this becomes. I'll contribute to the household with my work in town and here at home." "I wouldn't want it any other way," Yates assured her. "This would be our home, not just mine that you're living in." Emma nodded, relief washing through her. "Then yes, I'll stay." "We'll stay," she corrected, placing a hand on her rounded belly. Yates moved to sit beside her on the sofa, his eyes asking permission before he gently placed his hand next to hers. "I'll be a father to this child in every way that matters," he promised. "If you'll let me." "I would be honored," Emma whispered, covering his hand with hers. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, Yates leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle and brief, but it sealed a promise between them more binding than any formal agreement. As January brought even deeper snows and bitter cold, Emma's pregnancy entered its final weeks. Dr. Harrison insisted she reduce her hours at his office, concerned about her health and the baby's. Mrs. Sullivan similarly adjusted her duties at the boarding house, assigning her lighter work away from the hot stoves. Yates became increasingly protective, fretting about Emma's daily journeys into town despite the fact that he was the one driving her in the sleigh. More than once, Emma had to remind him that women had been having babies since the beginning of time, often under far worse conditions. "Doesn't mean I can't worry," he grumbled, helping her into the sleigh one particularly cold morning. "Especially when it's you and your little one at stake." The tenderness in his voice melted any irritation Emma might have felt at his hovering. She was learning that Yates's protectiveness stemmed not from doubt in her capabilities, but from the depth of his feelings for her. In late January, with the baby due in just weeks, Reverend Michaels visited the ranch. The minister had been a regular customer at Dr. Harrison's office, seeking treatment for his rheumatism, and had struck up a friendship with Emma. "Miss Vanderburg, Mr. Norwood," he greeted them, stomping snow from his boots on the porch. "Hope you don't mind my calling unannounced." "Not at all, Reverend," Yates replied, ushering the older man inside. "What brings you out in this weather?" The minister accepted a cup of coffee from Emma before addressing them both. "I'll be direct," he said. "Town's a small place and people talk. Your arrangement here has raised some eyebrows." Emma felt heat rise to her face, though she had expected this conversation eventually. "We're aware our situation is unconventional, Reverend." "Indeed," the minister agreed. "Though I must say, most folks speak more of admiration for Mr. Norwood's kindness than disapproval of the arrangement. Nevertheless," he sipped his coffee, studying them over the rim of his cup, "I wondered if you had given any thought to formalizing your situation." Yates and Emma exchanged glances. They had discussed marriage, of course, but had agreed to wait until after the baby's arrival, partly out of respect for the child's biological father, however undeserving, and partly to give Emma time to be certain of her feelings. "We have discussed it, Reverend," Yates answered for both of them, "but we felt it best to wait until after the baby comes." Reverend Michaels nodded thoughtfully. "A sensible approach in many ways. However, I might suggest an alternative perspective." He set his cup down, leaning forward earnestly. "The child will be here soon. Having parents who are properly married might ease its entrance into the community." Emma had not considered this aspect. She had been thinking of marriage primarily in terms of her relationship with Yates, not the impact on her child's future. "You make a valid point, Reverend," she acknowledged, "but arranging a wedding at this stage could be as simple as the two of you coming to my home with 2 witnesses," the minister said. "No need for elaborate preparations, just a legal and spiritual binding that would give your child the Norwood name from birth." After the Reverend departed, having left them with much to consider, Emma and Yates sat in thoughtful silence. "He's right about one thing," Yates said finally. "The baby would have an easier start with my name." Emma nodded slowly. "I hadn't thought that far ahead. But yes, in a small town like this it would matter. The question is," Yates continued carefully, "are you ready for that step? I meant what I said about waiting if you need more time." Emma considered the question seriously. When Thomas had abandoned her, she had thought herself finished with men and marriage forever. Yet here was Yates steadfast, honorable, kind, offering a life she had never dared imagine. "I don't need more time to know how I feel about you," she said softly. "If you're certain this is what you want me, the baby, all the complications we bring, then yes, I'm ready." Yates's face broke into a wide smile. "I've never been more certain of anything," he assured her, taking her hands in his. "Emma Vanderburg, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not because of what people think or even for the baby's sake, but because I love you and can't imagine my life without you in it." It was the first time either of them had spoken the word love aloud, though it had been growing between them for weeks. Hearing it now, Emma felt the last of her reservations dissolve. "Yes," she whispered, tears of joy spilling down her cheeks. "I love you too, Yates, and I would be proud to be your wife." 3 days later, on a clear, crisp January morning, Emma and Yates were married in Reverend Michaels's cozy parlor. Mrs. Sullivan and Dr. Harrison served as witnesses, both beaming with approval throughout the simple ceremony. Emma wore her blue dress, carefully let out to accommodate her advanced pregnancy, with a cream-colored shawl Yates had given her as a wedding gift. Yates wore his Sunday best, his usually unruly hair slicked down for the occasion. The words they spoke were traditional, but the feeling behind them was anything but conventional. When Yates slipped a simple gold band onto Emma's finger, his mother's, he had told her solemnly she felt as though her heart might burst with happiness. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Michaels declared, his voice warm with genuine pleasure. "Mr. and Mrs. Norwood, Mrs. Norwood." The name felt right to Emma, like a garment tailored perfectly to her measure. As Yates bent to kiss her, sealing their vows, she silently thanked whatever twist of fate had left her stranded at the Ouray depot that autumn evening. The celebration that followed at the boarding house was small but joyful. Mrs. Sullivan had prepared a special luncheon, and several townspeople stopped by to offer congratulations. Emma was touched by the genuine warmth of their reception. This community that had first seemed so foreign had become home in just a few short months. Dr. Harrison raised a toast to the newlyweds. "To Yates and Emma," he said, lifting his glass. "May your lives together be as beautiful as the mountains that surround us and as enduring as the foundations of this town." That evening, as Yates drove them home in the sleigh, Emma nestled against his side, secure in the knowledge that she was no longer an unwelcome guest in his house but his wife, returning to their home. "Happy, Mrs. Norwood?" Yates asked, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "More than I ever thought possible," Emma replied honestly. "A few months ago I thought my life was over. Now it feels like it's just beginning. For both of us," Yates agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. As they approached the ranch, their ranch now, Emma felt the baby move vigorously within her. "Someone else is excited too," she laughed, placing Yates's hand where he could feel the movement. His expression of wonder at the strong kicks never failed to touch Emma's heart. From the moment she had confided her pregnancy, Yates had treated the child as precious, never as an unwelcome complication or a reminder of another man. "I think he's going to be a rambunctious one," Yates observed. "He?" Emma questioned with a smile. "You're so certain it's a boy." Yates shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. "Just a feeling. Would you mind if it were?" "Not at all," Emma assured him. "Boy or girl, this child will be loved. That's what matters." February arrived with a temporary thaw that turned the snowdrifts to slush and made travel easier. Emma had reluctantly agreed to stop working until after the baby's birth, though she still insisted on maintaining the household and even helping with some of the lighter ranch chores when Yates wasn't looking. "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met," Yates complained good-naturedly, finding her collecting eggs one morning when she was supposed to be resting. "Which is exactly why you married me," Emma retorted with a grin. Yates couldn't argue with that. Instead, he simply took the basket from her hands and escorted her back to the house, where the cradle and rocking chair waited in readiness beside the fireplace. The baby arrived on February 15th, during another snowstorm that howled around the eaves of the ranch house like a living thing. Emma's labor began shortly after midnight, and Yates, after one panicked moment when he realized he couldn't possibly reach town for Dr. Harrison, settled into the role of birth attendant with remarkable composure. "My mother delivered most of the babies in our area," he explained as he boiled water and prepared clean linens. I helped her a few times. Never thought I'd be delivering my own child, though. Emma, gripping the bedpost through a contraction, managed a weak smile at his words. Your own child, she repeated softly when the pain subsided. Yates's eyes met hers, fierce with emotion. Yes, he said simply. Mine in every way that matters. The labor was long and difficult, but just as dawn broke over the mountains, casting pink light through the bedroom window, a lusty cry announced the arrival of their son. You were right, Emma whispered, exhausted but radiant as Yates placed the swaddled infant in her arms. It's a boy. He's perfect, Yates declared, voice husky with emotion as he perched on the edge of the bed beside them. Just like his mother. Emma studied the tiny face, the button nose, the shock of dark hair, the perfect miniature fingers that clutched reflexively at her nightgown. What shall we call him? She asked. They had discussed names but hadn't settled on any, wanting to meet their child first. Now, looking at the sturdy little boy who had fought his way into the world during a snowstorm, Emma thought she knew. What about Samuel? She suggested. After your father. Yates looked startled, then deeply moved. You'd want that? I would, Emma confirmed. Samuel Norwood, a good, strong name for our son. Our son, Yates repeated, as if testing the words. Samuel. He gently stroked the baby's cheek with one finger. Welcome to the world, Samuel Norwood. You're going to love it here. The weeks that followed were a blur of feedings, diaper changes, and precious moments of discovery as they adjusted to life with a newborn. Samuel proved to be a generally contented baby with a healthy appetite and a startling set of lungs when he was displeased. Gets that from his mother, Yates teased when Samuel protested a cold cloth during his bath. I beg your pardon, Emma retorted, trying and failing to look offended. I am always perfectly reasonable in my complaints. Of course, dear. Yates agreed with exaggerated solemnity, earning himself a playful swat from a nearby towel. These moments of light-hearted banter had become precious to Emma. She had always known Yates to be kind and thoughtful, but the dry humor that emerged as they grew more comfortable with each other was a constant delight. Spring arrived gradually, the snow retreating up the mountainsides as the valley below filled with new growth. Emma, recovering her strength, began to take Samuel for short walks around the ranch, pointing out the horses, the cattle, and the first wildflowers pushing through the soil. Your papa built all this, she told the baby one afternoon as they stood watching Yates repair a section of fencing. Someday it will be yours. Yates, overhearing as he approached, wiped his brow with a bandana. Getting ahead of yourself there, Mrs. Norwood. I plan to be running this place for many years yet. And I plan to hold you to that, Mr. Norwood, Emma replied with a smile, shifting Samuel to her other arm. Your son needs time to learn all your ranching wisdom before he takes over. Our son, Yates corrected gently, as he always did when Emma made this distinction. He reached for the baby, who went willingly into his strong arms. And I think he's going to be smarter than his old man, probably take after his clever mother. As Samuel grew and thrived, so did Emma and Yates's relationship. The bonds that had formed during their unusual courtship deepened into a partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and a love that continually surprised Emma with its strength. In late spring, when Samuel was 3 months old, a letter arrived from Boston, the first communication Emma had received from her family since she left. With trembling hands, she opened the envelope, preparing herself for recriminations or worse. Instead, she found a brief note from her mother, acknowledging receipt of Emma's letter, sent shortly after their marriage, and expressing cautious interest in her new life and grandson. There was no mention of forgiveness or reconciliation, but neither was there outright rejection. It was, Emma decided, a beginning. Will you write back? Yates asked that evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Samuel slept contentedly in a basket at their feet, his small face peaceful in repose. I think so, Emma replied thoughtfully. They're still family after all, and Samuel should know his grandparents if they're willing. You could invite them to visit, Yates suggested. Let them see what you've built here. Emma looked at him in surprise. You wouldn't mind? They're your family, Yates said simply. And family is important even when they disappoint you. Emma reached for his hand, squeezing it gratefully. You are a remarkable man, Yates Norwood. Just practical, he demurred. Besides, I want them to see that you made the right choice coming west, that you're happy here. Are you fishing for compliments, Mr. Norwood? Emma teased. Because you know very well that I am extraordinarily happy. Yates's smile was slow and warm. Maybe I just like hearing you say it, Mrs. Norwood. Then I shall say it every day, Emma promised, leaning against his shoulder as the last rays of sunlight gilded the peaks. Every single day. By Samuel's first birthday, the Norwood Ranch had prospered beyond their expectations. A particularly good season with the horses had allowed Yates to purchase additional acreage, and Emma's careful management of their finances meant they had savings for the first time. Emma had returned to work part-time at Dr. Harrison's office, bringing Samuel with her. The arrangement worked well. The doctor was fond of the boy and often used him as a demonstration model when explaining child care to new mothers. He's going to be a doctor himself one day, with all this early training, Doctor. Harrison joked as Samuel solemnly allowed his heart to be listened to during a slow afternoon. Don't let his father hear you say that, Emma laughed. Yates is counting on him to take over the ranch. Why not both? The doctor suggested. Ranching doctor, we could use more of those around here. The idea stuck with Emma, and she mentioned it to Yates that evening as they prepared for the small celebration they had planned for Samuel's birthday. A doctor, Yates considered, watching Samuel push himself up on sturdy legs, using the sofa for balance. Could be. He certainly got the determination for it. You wouldn't be disappointed if he didn't follow in your footsteps? Emma asked. Yates shook his head firmly. I want him to find his own path, whatever that might be. He wrapped an arm around Emma's waist, pulling her close. Just like his mother did. The birthday celebration was simple but joyful. Mrs. Sullivan had baked a small cake, and several of their friends from town came out to the ranch to mark the occasion. As Emma watched Yates help Samuel blow out his single candle, surrounded by people who had become their extended family, she marveled at how completely her life had transformed in just over a year. From a desperate young woman abandoned at a train depot to a wife, mother, and respected member of the community, the journey seemed almost unbelievable. Yet here she was, with a husband who adored her, a son who thrived under their care, and a home that was truly her own. Later that night, after the guests had departed and Samuel was tucked into the crib that had replaced the cradle as he grew, Emma and Yates stood on the porch in the moonlight. Happy? Yates asked softly, echoing the question he had asked on their wedding night. Beyond measure, Emma replied honestly. Sometimes I can't believe this is my life. That day at the depot when I thought everything was lost, I never imagined finding all this. I'm glad you were abandoned there, Yates admitted, terrible as it sounds. If that man hadn't left you, you would never have come into my life. His loss was most definitely your gain, Emma agreed with a smile. Our gain, Yates corrected, drawing her into his arms. This life we've built together, it's more than I ever thought I'd have. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's embrace under the vast Colorado sky, Emma thought about the long, winding path that had led her here, the mistakes and heartaches, the courage it had taken to step into the unknown, and the unexpected joy she had found in this man and the life they shared. "I love you, Yates Norwood," she whispered against his chest. "Thank you for saying your house had room." Yates tightened his arms around her, his voice rough with emotion as he replied, "Best words I ever spoke. And now it's not just my house that has room for you, Emma. It's my heart, my life, my future. All of it has room for you. Always will." The years passed, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their family. 2 years after Samuel's birth, Emma gave birth to twin girls Rebecca and Rose, who brought both double joy and double mischief to the ranch. Yates doted shamelessly on his daughters, while maintaining a special bond with Samuel, who followed his father everywhere, soaking up knowledge about horses, cattle, and the land. By the time Samuel was 5, he was already showing a remarkable affinity for animals, often knowing instinctively when a horse was in distress or a cow was about to calve. The twins, at 3, were as different as two sisters could be. Rebecca quiet and thoughtful like her father, Rose inquisitive and outspoken like her mother. Emma's parents eventually did visit, making the long journey from Boston with considerable trepidation. Their initial stiffness melted away when confronted with Samuel's engaging grin and the twins' irresistible charm. Even Emma's stern father couldn't maintain his disapproval in the face of Yates's obvious devotion to his daughter and grandchildren. "You've done well for yourself," he grudgingly admitted to Emma on their last evening. "This is a good life you've built." "It is," Emma agreed simply. "Better than I could have imagined." Her mother, more willing to acknowledge past mistakes, embraced Emma tearfully before their departure. "I'm sorry we weren't more supportive," she whispered, "but I'm so proud of the woman you've become." Those words, so long wished for, filled a place in Emma's heart she hadn't realized was still empty. As the Vanderburgs' carriage disappeared down the road toward town, Emma felt Yates's arm slide around her waist. "All right?" he asked softly. Emma nodded, leaning into his strength. "Yes, it was good to make peace with the past." "The past has a way of shaping us," Yates observed thoughtfully. "Even the painful parts." "Especially those," Emma agreed, thinking of the desperate young woman she had been and the long journey that had brought her to this moment, standing beside a man who loved her completely, surrounded by children who were their shared joy, on land that had become truly home. 10 years to the day after Emma first arrived at the Ouray depot, she and Yates hosted a gathering at the ranch. Their family had grown again with the addition of Joshua, now 4, who had his father's serious demeanor and his mother's love of books. The ranch had prospered as well, expanding to include a successful horse breeding operation that was known throughout the territory. As evening fell and their guests departed, Yates found Emma standing on the porch, gazing toward the mountains just as she had that first night. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Norwood," he said, joining her at the railing. Emma smiled, leaning into his familiar warmth. "I was just thinking about journeys," she said. "How the ones that seem most devastating at the time can lead to the greatest joy." Yates nodded, understanding immediately. 10 years ago today," he remembered. "You looked so lost sitting on that bench I almost didn't approach you." "But you did," Emma said softly, "and you said 6 words that changed my life forever." "My house has room," Yates recalled with a smile. "Our house," Emma corrected, linking her arm through his as they gazed out at the ranch where their children played and their life had taken root. "And it always will."